Hey, Lee with LG Speed and Custom here, and welcome to part 3 of Gordie's Ardun swap in his 32 Roadster. So if you're new here, welcome. This is Gordie's 32 Ford Roadster. This is part 3 of our build series on it. The first video, we pulled this Pontiac 389 with a turbo 400 out of the car and replaced it with this blown Ardun Flathead and a T5 5-speed. So video 1 and 2, basically we took it apart, got the engine and transmission in, got the clutch assembly figured out, built some headers, and got it to the point that it's at right now. I've been picking away the last couple days doing stuff that's not really important, just hooking wiring back up. We had to extend the wiring harness because the Pontiac starter was on this side, so we had to extend the wiring over to this side. Not super hard or important stuff, so I didn't bother filming any of it. But now we are starting to get into some of the more fun stuff, the stuff that you guys would want to see. So I'll show you where we're at right now. So I am not an Ardun expert. This is the first Ardun I've ever worked on. And we got to the temperature sender. Worked our way down the list to the point where we're supposed to hook this temperature sender up. And I could not for the life of me figure out where on this engine the temperature sender hooks up to. So I got a friend, Craig Ross in Vancouver, and he's got an Ardun. So I was like, hey man, where does this go? And he's like, well, funny enough, there isn't anywhere for it to go. So on his, he took this thermostat. Well, I guess it's not even a thermostat housing because there's no thermostat on this either, but basically this upper rad hose outlet. On his, he took that and just basically welded a bung to it to accept the temperature sender. So that's what we're gonna start this video working on. We're gonna weld these to these rad outlets here. I've got one to go on this side for the actual temperature gauge, and then I've got another bung to go on the other side, and that is going to be where our electric fan sending unit goes to kick the fan on and off. So we'll start by taking these these housings, rad outlet doodads off, and we'll take them over to the welding bench. I might have got a little ahead of myself taking this piece off. I think I'm gonna fit this on here first. Reason being, when this was unbolted, I had no idea where it needed to be anymore. So I put an Allen key in the bolt here. That way I can make sure wherever I put this, I have enough room that I can get this bolt in and out still. I think I wanna go somewhere around there. So I'm gonna start shaving this end down, because basically like this here kind of has like a ball like that, and we're sitting kind of like that on there. So we've got a big gap down here by where my pinky is that we gotta fill. So if I start shaving this end down until it kind of fits the ball of down here, until it sits like that, and then we'll weld it on, and obviously drill a hole because we need water to get up in here. Like so. We've got this whittled down so that it sits nice, just like that. We got a good even gap all the way around. We've got room that we can still get to our 3 bolt holes, and still room that we can actually thread the end of the temperature gauge in there without it interfering with anything in here. We'll take this over to the bench now and get it cleaned up. Maybe put a couple tacks on it, and then we'll drill a hole going through there so that we don't need a huge hole. Probably 1/2 inch is fine. 3/8 maybe, 7/16, I don't know. Something basically big enough that we just need this part here to sit in the water or the coolant so that it can read the temperature. Not rocket science. Let's weld this up. I've just got a piece of fresh, brand new sandpaper, and I'm just gonna sand this a little bit. Aluminum really needs to be nice and clean when you weld it, and it doesn't need any, or like you can't have any steel stuff. Like if I had sanded steel with this, it would have little bits of carbon impregnated in it, and when you go to sand the aluminum, you would be transferring that carbon into the aluminum. Basically, when you're welding aluminum, you got to treat it kind of like the same way that you would treat raw chicken in a kitchen. It's kind of got to be like self-contained. You can't let it, no cross-contamination. So we'll sand this all up nice and fresh, clean, except for where our marks are, obviously, because I mean, we need to know where to put our piece. So I'll sand everything except that, tack it on this side, and then go back and sand that afterwards. I also have, you can use a wire brush as well, but this, it's almost like it's got a coating on it. I don't know if that's just my imagination or if it's like being painted with something, but I don't know if you can see it on camera, but you can really see the difference between what I've sanded and what we have there. Oh. We'll do this piece as well. Should be pretty good. And then we'll weld it up. I've just tacked it, and now we can take it over to the car and we'll just, that's really warm. We'll take it over to the car and mock it up just to make sure it's going to work before we fully weld it and drill our hole through there once it cools down. All right, let's test fit this thing. Bolt number 1 works. This one should be fine. There's lots of room there. And the guy in the very back here, that went in pretty good. Okay, so test 1 works. All our bolts go in. Now, test 2, can we actually tighten any of them? So this guy, yeah, that works great. We can get an Allen key in there. The one back here, I had to get a little creative to get that one out because an Allen key never fit to the way it was originally. So this guy, oh yeah, it still fits in there. That fits great. So now our third test, can we actually get this sending unit in? Oh yeah, tons of room. Cool. All right, let's take this back to the bench and finish welding it and put our hole in it. I don't know if it matters if we drill the hole first or weld it first. So we'll probably weld it first because the welder is still running from when we just tacked it. The cool thing about aluminum, it cools down really fast. All right, we'll see you back at the bench. I got a 1/2-inch drill bit, and I just put a little bit of tape around here in case it starts bouncing around in there, that we don't muck up those brand new threads. So this might be a little bit weird because we're trying to like drill on top of a, basically like drilling on top of a ball here. I'm going to use a pilot bit. Well, that worked pretty good, I think. Look at that. When we put this guy in here, our little sender, the sensor part, should get a nice good reading now. There's one side done. And the next side is gonna basically be the mirror image of this. Easy peasy. I welded the other bung on here for the fan temperature sending unit, sensor, doodad guy thingy. And I was gonna start wiring the fan up now, but Jim's inside the car doing some stuff. So I'm gonna move on to the steering and start putting this together. We gotta connect this all the way down to there, which should be okay. We've had it mocked up once before. Jim has just put the seat back in the car and is putting the shifter in. So this shifter, you see right here, shifter handle for T5. Well, that doesn't work, but we can make it work. Jim's basically just going to chop this off, grind this flat, and drill 2 holes in there to bolt that on. And then when we do the interior, we're going to do the interior in this car later on, we can just make a shifter boot that covers that little transition right there. That's one of the problems here in Victoria. There's no speed shops or anything here, so all the aftermarket parts, we have to buy everything online. And sometimes stuff, like if you see it in person, you'd be like, oh no, that's not going to work. But when you're buying it online, you can't see the whole part to realize that that T5 shifter handle doesn't fit on this particular T5. It will fit, I think it'll fit on a Camaro or a Mustang T5, but definitely won't fit that one without a grinder. So anyways, I'll start on the steering. Jim's got this shifter all figured out. He just ground a flat spot on here and bolted it to there. Works great. We'll make a shifter boot in the future that will cover this little transition area, and it should be fine. He's moving on to the fuel regulator now. I got the steering put together in here. Remember I said I had this together and it would work great? Well, it's together, but it does not work great. This U-joint right here is on a little bit too much of an angle, so it's got a bind in it. I've marked out on the header here. I'm going to take this header off again and heat that little spot up right there and put a dimple in it so that we can slide that U-joint down just a little bit further. Hopefully it'll get that bind out of there. With that header out of the way, I managed to slide this down a little bit, and we've got trouble-free steering now. When we mocked it up, I mean, I had this shaft in here when I built the headers to make sure I had clearance, but I didn't take into consideration the girthiness of the U-joint here. But that's fine. We'll just put a little dimple in it and life will go on. No big deal. Hey, look at this. We got steering. Wow. Isn't that marvelous? That little dimple I put in there did the trick. The steering is all nice and tight. It's all back together now. Notice there's a little bit Loctite coming out of there. Whenever I put these fittings together, or these U-joints, I always put Loctite on the set screw as well as the jam nut, because you never want those to come loose. This one is, you'll probably be quick to point out, this one is missing a jam nut. It's always been missing. There's quite a few on the steering system that's missing. So I've got this old extra U-joint here. I'll probably just steal them from there and put that on. In the meantime, Jim has got this fuel regulator mounted. Did a nice job on this hose end here. Isn't that great? The 90, that's the magic touch right there, this 90. So it comes out of there, goes into here. This gauge, in a perfect world, if I was to do this again, I probably would have put a 90 on there so that you can see it a little better, but it's still very easy to see. And this is kind of just a one-time, you set it and you forget it. So that is done. Jim also got this oil filter, remote oil filter mount on the firewall. Isn't that a nice piece? I like it so much. So we got a plumb out of, we got these two holes down here, or these two fittings. We got to plumb some lines out of there into there, and then we've got oil. So that's, I think, one of the next things to do on the list, but we're plugging away at it. It is not far off from firing up at this point. So we're plugging away on this list over here. When this car came in, the very first thing I did was remove the hood top and rods. And from that point on, every time I took something off, I would write it down on the list. That way, when it's time to put it back together, you can start at the bottom of the list and work your way up and know what order everything has to go back in. Jim has hooked the fuel sender back up, so that is done. I just finished the steering. Next up, we just got to put the toe boards back in. But before we do that, we still have to wire up the relay for the electric fan, and we got another relay here for the fuel pump. So we've got our fittings now to plumb this oil filter guy up. So in the last video, I don't know what happened, but I was explaining how to put these hose ends on braided line, and I don't know why, but the audio completely glitched out. It paused the whole time I was explaining it and then looped it again over. It was super weird, and I don't know. So I apologize for that. And I'm going to do it again. I'm going to show you guys how to put these ends on right now. The first thing we're going to do is get a measurement, probably 9.5 inches. We're just measuring from this point here, 90 degrees, and then up to here. So we'll take one of these over to the bench and then cut some hose at 9.5 inches. You know, I don't even know if we need to cut this at 9.5 inches yet. We can just put our hose end on this end right here and then actually go and fit it on the car to get a little bit more accurate. Somebody in the last video recommended using masking tape rather than electrical tape, and that was a good trick. That worked good. When you cut this braided hose, you want to wrap tape around it. If you just go and cut it all willy-nilly like that, it's going to fray and you'll never get this end on. So the first step after you've cut your end is you unthread this guy. These are, when you buy them, they come threaded on like that. You want to unthread that end. Take this end, and it's got this like beveled end. That slides together like that. This is why it's important not to have your frayed ends. So if we push really hard, give it a little twist. There we go. Push that on there until it bottoms out all the way in there. Which we're there. There's a little lip in here, and the end of this hose will actually make contact with that lip. Now we can put this in the vise. These are special jaws for doing AN fittings. So we'll put that in there. Tighten it up. And now we take this end. Still has a little bit of grease on it from, I must have been using this on something else. Put a little bit of grease on that end and thread it in there. Just grab a wrench here. That is a 3/4 inch wrench. So you just thread that all the way in until it is flush with the end again. Okay, we are tightening up here. You don't want to go too crazy with these because they will break. I did that on the last one. There we go, a completed hose end. Easy peasy. All right, we've threaded this end in where we need it to be, so let's mock this side up. Probably about there should work okay. Let's put a little mark on here. And we'll wrap some tape around there and cut it with the zip. Okay, let's see how this fits. Pretty good. There you go. That's how to make a hose end with all the audio. So we're going to basically do the same thing from this fitting to this fitting, and then our oil filter is plumbed. Moving on to the upper rad hoses now. So this is a chrome upper rad hose kit for a 41 to 48 Ford, and it fits great. I've already got this side put together, and that worked out really nice. Inside the outlet here, we've got a thermostat. Now on 59A and Ardun Flatheads, I guess, there's no actual thermostat housing. So the thermostat literally just presses down in there. And then when you put this tube in, it just jams down and literally sandwiches the thermostat in place. It's a little bit of a weird system. Probably not the best, but that's probably why in 1949 they switched to a regular thermostat housing. So we'll put this together, and then we can't put coolant in it yet. I still got to put the fan sending unit in here. Then we can put coolant in it. let's go under the dash, shall we? So we got 2 relays that I just mounted here. One for the fan and one for the fuel pump. So stuff like fans, fuel pumps, headlights, big heavy load stuff, I always wire them into relays. This fan one is actually, it's a kit that you can buy, and there's a little dial in there that you can control when the fan kicks on and off. It's a little bit, like, not the easiest to adjust under the dash here, but it's also just kind of one of those, like, you set it once and forget it kind of things. So we've got a wiring harness here that we're gonna work on next. This has to go through the firewall to that temperature sender. And the rest is basically, this one goes to the fan. This one is direct power from the fuse box. Gray one here is for the sender, and then the yellow one, by process of elimination, is the last one left, and this is the one that gets key power. So how a relay works is when you turn the key on, this gets power. And when this powers up, it activates the relay, which then takes heavy load power. This is a much thicker wire. Heavy load power direct from the battery or your main power source, and then runs it directly to the fan. Same with the fuel pump here. We're gonna have we got a ground. Can't remember what the blue wire is for, but red wire is like key power. Yellow wire goes to, no, yellow wire, I can't remember. I'll have to look. But one of them goes to the key, one of them goes to the fuel pump, one of them is ground, and one of them is main power. The blue one, I don't know what it does. I'll look into that a little more. This wire here coming through the floor is the one that runs to the fuel pump itself. Jim put that in the other day. So now that I got you all confused with wiring colors, let's wire this up. All right, we've got our relays all wired up now. When I was all confused with the colors on the second relay, I found out that, you know, the colors don't really matter because they're different. They're completely different from the colors on this one, even though it's all the same. So always double check your own color or wiring diagram before you put a relay in. Anyways, we got one labeled here for fan, one labeled for fuel pump. I really like to label wiring when I'm putting it together, just so that the next guy that's working on it knows what's going on. We've got an inline fuse going to the fan. The wire running to the fuel pump is labeled. Over here, I stole key power out of the fuse panel from the heater circuit, because this car obviously doesn't have a heater, so we had an open wire there, or an open circuit. But I labeled it fuel, just so that, like I said, the next person working on it knows that that's the circuit for the fuel pump. Same with, I tapped into the main power. There's a main power fuse right here that comes from the battery to the fuse panel. So when I tapped into that, I labeled fuel pump. The electric fan wiring worked out pretty good. It's just got a nice little plug down here, and our sending unit is tucked in there, and our wiring runs through this nice little loom here. So when we turn the key on, we can hear, well, you probably won't be able to hear it, but the fuel pump fires up and we've got fuel pressure. So we're still gonna have to set this to its proper pressure later. We're not gonna worry about that right now. Shut this off. We also have no fuel leaks, which is pretty cool. So we're not done wiring yet. We've got one more piece left to do. And that is this Autometer Magneto signal converter. So what this does is the tack that we have here, this cool Stewart Warner tack. Most tacks, they have, you know, one wire goes to the negative side of the coil, one goes to the positive side of the coil. But this car running a mag, mags don't use coils. They generate everything, they're self-contained all in here. All they have is one single wire that hooks up to it, and that literally just grounds it out. And once it grounds out, it kills the spark. So this magic little box basically makes it so that you can wire a tachometer up to a magneto. We're gonna wire this thing up next, and And I think we're done wiring. We're gonna have to take a pause on this. There's something on their wiring diagram that I don't quite understand. And I tried to call them just now, but nobody's working in America right now because I guess it's Thanksgiving there. So we'll do that another day when everybody is working. Nobody wants to work anymore. I do have the mag mounted, the mag switch, I should say. I just built a little bracket out of some 1/8" aluminum, bent it 90 degrees, polished it. So here's our switch. I mounted it kind of right in the middle of the dash where it's nice and easy to get to. Reason being is I grew up with like a racing background. That's where I got my start with cars, was with race cars. And your kill switch you always want very accessible. So when you're sitting in here, steering away, shifting gears, and things go south, bam, shut the car off. Or if you're driving along and something's going weird and your passenger's like, oh man, boom, shut the car off. So it's in a nice, easy spot to get to. Basically all it is to make this thing work is we've got our one stud on the mag here. So we run a wire from there. That wire goes into the back of the toggle switch here. Then we've got another one that just grounds to, we got this ground bar up here. Sorry, it's kind of dark, but it just goes to the ground bar. So when it's open like this, the circuit is not connected, meaning the Magneto will make spark. When you close it and it shuts this circuit, shuts the switch off, it closes the circuit and grounds the mag out, which allows it not to have spark. So I think we are just about ready to fire this thing. I'm gonna go ahead and fill it full of coolant. We have to set our fuel pressure regulator, and then we're gonna pull the plugs out, take the valve covers off, and prime the oil system. Then we can put the valve covers back on. And today's Thursday. Gordie wants to be here for the fire up, and he can't make it until Monday. So we'll get it all ready, and then on Monday, kerblamo, fire in the hole. Our coolant system's full of coolant now. None of it ran on the floor. It's incredible. We had no fuel leaks and no coolant leaks. Weird. So we're gonna get ready to prime this thing now. To prime it, all Gordie wants to do, because you can't really like on a normal V8, you have like you take the distributor out and you can turn the oil pump with a drill and a long tool. You can't do that on this. So what we're gonna do is just pull all the spark plugs out. And there we go. And basically just roll the engine over with the mag turned off. It's really hard to get out. They go way down in there, except for that one. And yeah, once it's, we'll just crank it over until it has oil pressure, and then put the plugs back in, turn the mag on, and it should fire up. This engine, this isn't the first time this engine is fired, so it's not like we're breaking it in. This engine was built by Don Ferguson, who reproduces the Ardun stuff. And he ran it on his dyno, where it made 335 horsepower. For those that don't know the history on Arduns, and I'll admit when we started this project, I was not fully educated on them. I knew what they were, but I didn't know all the details on them. So this engine was designed, I shouldn't say this engine, these cylinder heads were designed in 1947 by Akron Duntov, the guy that, like, you know, basically everyone knows of like Duntov, from General Motors. Same guy. So he designed this engine with his brother in 1947, and it was designed as a way, come on, get out of there. Spark plug's way down in there. It was designed as a way to keep flatheads from running cooler, as well as creating considerably more horsepower. There we go. And they were originally used on garbage trucks. That was their purpose, was to get more power out of, you know, their garbage truck. Then racers discovered them, and here we are. So I'm going to pull the rest of these plugs out. Then we're going to take the valve covers off, and that way, as it's rolling over, we can see the oil pressure rolling through.
That you're the best, but I know you're only second guess. Those things you do.
Okay, I think this should pop off. I don't know, I've never taken a valve cover off an Ardun before. There's something holding it still. It's loose. I need a mallet. There we go. Wow, look at that. There's a lot of stuff in there. That doesn't look like my flathead. It's weird this is totally smooth. You think there'd be like a little lip in there, I guess. Valve lash hot, intake. 10 thou, exhaust 10 thou. Cool. All right, the mag is shut off. I pulled the fuse out of the fuel pump, so the fuel pump's not going to be running. Let's crank this thing over and wait for some oil to pressure up. See if the gauge is reading anything. Probably not. Not yet. Oh, it's coming up on the gauge now. We're reading like 40 pounds on the gauge. Oh, there it's coming out. See it all dripping out of here? Cool. Well, that's making a mess. Nothing on this side yet. You want to let me know when it starts coming out on that side? It should be pretty close. Cool. Drip, drip, drip.
That you're the best, but I know you're only second guess. Those things you do, I can tell. Should it be right when I see you swell? Well, honey, you think that you're the best, but I know you're only second guess.
All right, this thing is ready to fire, which we're gonna do on the next video. No, I'm just kidding, I wouldn't do that. But we are gonna wait a little bit before we fire it, because it's Thursday evening now, or late afternoon, and Gordie is busy, he's out of town tomorrow, so he's gonna come on Monday. Monday we're gonna fire this thing up and see what happens. So, don't go anywhere. Gordie came by this afternoon and we fired the car up. Unfortunately, we were like just so in the zone and in the moment that we missed recording the first 30 seconds or so. Nothing really happened. We cranked it over until it had oil pressure, hit the mag, and we fired up right away. So fortunately though, we did still get a lot of the initial fire up filmed for you guys. It was just like the first 30 seconds that you missed. So check it out. We'll cut to that now.
Mags on.
Pretty cool, huh? So the fire up went great. Obviously there's a couple little hiccups and bugs we got to work out. We've got an oil fitting that's leaking, one of the AN fittings. It's where the oil pressure gauge hooks up to. There's like this little weird bobulation of AN fittings to get oiling to the, I think it's actually, yeah, to get oil pressure to the heads. And there's a piece on there that the oil pressure gauge threads into. And it's an AN fitting, and I think the fitting on the oil pressure line itself isn't happy with it. So you're gonna take that apart and find out why that's leaking. And we also had a little bit of an issue with the choke with holding it on high idle. So Gordie actually, he got that figured out. He sprayed a little bit of, just needed some penetrating oil just to free it up. This engine, Don Ferguson built this engine, but he built it like, I think Gordie said it's been sitting for 20 years. So, I mean, it's expected that it's gonna have a little bit of issues to sort out, but for the most part, I mean, it went great. Worked out great. We got it up to temperature, sat at 190 degrees. The fan works, temperature gauge works. We got oil pressure, the charging system works. Put it in gear, wheels go forward, wheels go backwards. So we're having a little bit of a winter storm right now, so we're not gonna go take it for a test drive. But we gotta button up that oil leak and stuff first. I still don't have the tack hooked up. I haven't been able to get a hold of anyone at Vertex to get that figured out. But I mean, we'll pick away at it still. A couple little things to finish up, and then yeah, we can go take this thing for a test drive. That will definitely be in the next video. We're gonna do a little bit of interior work as well, like I said, so I don't know, maybe we'll just probably keep going with this build. Do a couple more videos. So thanks everybody for watching. I hope you really enjoyed that video. I know I really enjoyed, making the video for you guys, and thanks to Gordie for, letting me work on such a cool project. This is definitely a career highlight for me to put a blow in Ardun in a 32 Ford Roadster. Thanks to Hot Rod Hullabaloo for the music on this video, and as always, make sure to check out lgspeedcustom.com and get yourself a LG Speed and Custom shirt or stickers, whatever you want. Just I just really appreciate the support. So if you want to support this channel, go check out lgspeedcustom.com. And that's it for now. We'll see you later. We'll see you on the next video.